Hello and welcome to my poster. My name is Pablo and I'm a postdoc in the group of Christian Eglin. Today I would like to show you our latest results on long-term STET imaging of membrane packing and dynamics. In our constant look for molecular resolution with the so-called super resolution techniques, we sometimes forget about how important temporal resolution is. And one could say that most super resolution techniques greatly limit temporal resolution. If we imagine a perfect experiment, we want to be able not only to image with high frame rates, but also for prolonged periods of time. In the short side of the scale, signal-to-noise ratio is our biggest limitation to temporal resolution. However, in the long term, photobleaching is the main problem. In the case of STET super-resolution microscopy, photobleaching is especially a limitation because the depletion laser can cause higher rates of photobleaching. Today I would like to show you that with exchangeable dyes, not only we can do super resolution, but also we can do it for prolonged periods of time. To quantify lipid packing, we use polarity sensitive dyes, which show a change in their emission spectrum depending on the packing of the membrane. In other membranes where the polarity is lower, they show a blue shifted spectrum, and in these other membranes, a red shifted spectrum. We can quantify this by means of the GP function that uses the intensity on the blue and the red part of the signal, and basically the higher the GP value we obtain, the more ordered the membrane is. To get rid of photobleaching, we use exchangeable dyes. Exchangeable dyes are quite interesting because they show an intermediate affinity for the target, in this case membranes. So they constantly bind and unbind or exchange, and thus if a dye gets bleached, because it will leave and a new dye will come in, we will not see a signal loss because of photobleaching. Importantly, these dyes do not emit photons when they're in solution because of the change in polarity. Our exchangeable dye, which was designed by the Klimchenko group, is called NR4A, and it's exchangeable because it has an intermediate affinity for membranes due to the 4-carbon alkyl chain marked in green. As a control, we use the long carbon alkyl chain NR12A, which is non-exchangeable. First, we check if NR4A was specific for the plasma membrane because this is the organelle we're most interested in your group. Because of the sulfonate group, which highly reduces the flip flow rate, we can observe that most of the signal, even for prolonged periods of time, 1 hour in the case of this video, comes from the plasma membrane, which we can quantify. So NR4A specifically labels live cell plasma membranes. Then we check for sensitivity, and then for that we compared in model membranes the GP values obtained with NR4A and Loudon. These are represented, the difference between the GP values is represented by the gray bar, and you can see that NR4A shows a sensitivity almost as high as that of Loudon, which is highly sensitive. We also tried to see if this dye was sensitive in live cells, and for that we use control cells and cholesterol depleted plasma membranes that we did with cyclodextrin, and from the graph you can already observe a clear red shift, which is also evident on the GP images and quantification. So we can say that NR4A is highly sensitive to lipid packing changes. Then we check for photobleaching, which was, let's say, the most important experiment here. With non-exchangeable dyes in this experiment, which is a STET microscopy experiment, where we use a high STET laser power, you can see that after a couple of frames, the signal is completely gone. With exchangeable dyes, however, we can image for very prolonged periods of time, even when using very high laser powers, 250 milliwatts in the case of this video. You will see that at the end, because of phototoxicity, that the cell will eventually die, but we will still be receiving signal. With exchangeable dyes, photobleaching does not lead to signal loss, and I believe this is a very interesting and important observation. Last, we quantified its super resolution performance in the case of STET microscopy, and you can see that the highest STET power values we obtain a resolution of about 80 nanometers. So NR4A is compatible with super resolution. We use it for STET, but it can also be used for single molecule localization microscopy. I would like to finish with an example of what we can use exchangeable polarity sensitive dyes for. Here we use it to observe membrane fusion between a GUV, which is highly packed, as you can see from the GP video on the top side, and an SLB, a supported lipid bilayer, which is less packed. You will see that because of the addition of calcium, hemifusion happens, and then the lipids exchange, and the GP values equilibrate over time, and last we can observe membrane fusion. We can of course quantify the lipid packing of the vesicle through time, and we can easily distinguish hemifusion and fusion. With this, I would like to finish. All these results are available on a preprint on bioRxiv, and NR4A and NR12A are commercially available from cytoskeleton. Please, if you will have any questions, contact me on Twitter or by email.